Nicolas, thank you for being with us today. I understand KPMG just run a global CEO survey. So can you tell us a little bit about the result and what were some of the surprises, if any?
Yeah, well, the survey itself has been conducted over the spring and summer of this year, and we interviewed 1,200 CEOs from around the world, a large number of countries. And then when the results came in, I think what's always interesting is the similarities and the differences.
Yeah.
And one of the key surprises, I would say, is just the difference in responses by country.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the global average in a statistic, when you unpack that statistic, you can see very, very different responses.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I mean, we're here in Tokyo now. When we look at the Japanese cut of the data versus, say, the US cut, what we see is that the US is very, very aggressively thinking about growth today and over the next 3 years. And I think in Japan, it's far more about organic growth.
Yeah. And what were some of the findings for the European-based companies?
So the European-based companies are again looking at growth, but they are looking at a lot of operational efficiency improvements. So I think there's a correlation with how companies are thinking about their domestic country.
Yeah.
If they are very positive on their domestic country, they start to think about international expansion. And I think we found that 47% of CEOs are thinking about international expansion. For those companies that are in countries where they are less confident about the domestic outlook, the economic outlook, then I think you find them being more focused on operational efficiency improvements, and I think organic growth.
I see.
And a few of the other interesting statistics that were coming out is that 86% of respondents are very concerned about customer loyalty. And I think that was a very key finding, because most of the CEOs are now worried about how the world is changing around them. And that represents both opportunity but threat as well.
So what are some of the concrete business ideas that come out from this survey?
Well, I think one of the key drivers of change that CEOs are going to have to respond to over the next few years is the issue of sector convergence. And so what I mean by sector convergence is that we're going to see industries coming together, sectors coming together to create new models, new relationships, new rules of the game. And there's going to be new players coming in to those sectors. And if we think about connected cars as a good example, if you go back 10 years ago, connected cars were clearly the product of the automotive industry. Now what you see is that 15 or more sectors are playing in the car industry. So you have healthcare looking at the steering wheel of a car and thinking about heart rate and blood pressure. You've got insurance thinking about telematics boxes. You've got companies like Tesla thinking about batteries and hybrid power. You've got technology and software companies thinking about sensors, and industrial markets companies thinking about glass and technology. And if you roll it forwards and think about driverless cars, then there is so much more time in a journey, particularly long journeys, to be able to do other things. So the car actually becomes a destination. And I think it's just one example, but it's how sector convergence is really disrupting financial models, business models, and operating models.
Great example. So what do you see as some kind of generic strategy for options for companies? Should they go for more acquisition? Should we try to privilege organic growth? How do you see it?
So I think the first thing to recognize is that the life cycle of business models is going to shrink.
Yes.
and in some places the longevity is collapsing. So if in the past, and when I say the past, I mean only 3, 5, 7 years ago, when boards, management, chief executives are thinking about making capital investments, they're thinking about the return on investment, they are thinking about maybe a timeline of 3, 5, 7 years to be able to get payback. And there's plenty of research that shows that for strategies to be able to come to fruition, you need about 5 to 7 years. But in a world where convergence is collapsing the lifespan of a business model, you don't have 7 years. So I think that chief executives and boards are going to have to think about, well, how do we move faster? So I think a key theme that follows convergence is agility. And when I think you start looking inside agility, you start to ask the key strategic questions of, well, what do we want to be famous for? How are we going to be one of the winners in 3 to 5 years' time? And then you can start to ask questions about, well, where will we play? How will we win? What do we need to control? I think very interestingly now we are starting to move into the era of collaboration, where companies are going to come to the realization that they don't need to control everything themselves. And instead what they will do is they will start to collaborate with others. Where others have better technology, different customer groups, and you can leverage each other's credibility. I give you a really good example. Just this morning on CNN, I saw that there's an announcement between Cisco and Ericsson. And the language that they used was all about collaboration. And they talked about leveraging each other's strengths. And I think the benefit of collaboration over M&A, for example, is I think it is less public, it's less risky, could be less costly, and you can just more quietly go on with experimentation. And I think that innovation is going to be a critical driver of growth for companies. And for me, it's obvious that in a converging world, you have to see more innovation than you have in the past. And I think collaboration is going to be the safer route rather than M&A. Not in every circumstance, but in many.
So talking about Cisco and Ericsson, I mean, how does digital transformation fit into this survey? I mean, are CEOs concerned about digital transformation?
Yes, in particular. I mean, I think although they don't necessarily use the language of convergence when they talk about digital transformation, what they're really worried about is how sort of connected devices, how cloud and data analytics is going to impact their industry. And when it does impact, then I think that they start to think about the digital transformation of their organizations. For me, I think the answer has to be about embracing, not resisting. I think there are absolutely operational efficiencies to be gained from doing digital transformation, but I think the one that we haven't quite seen the full extent of yet, we're in the early stages, is actually around the business model, digital transformation. I think that's where the excitement's going to be over the next few years.
Well, thank you very much. These are great insights, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.